Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this Friday night. We begin tonight with a historic moment in our nation's 247 years. A federal indictment revealing extraordinary and grave criminal counts facing Donald Trump and the charges that his actions have endangered U.S. national security. This is it right here, the 49-page indictment. It was unsealed today for everyone who wants to read it, and it is breathtaking in its scope and devastating in its detail. There are 37 counts against Donald Trump, including the voluminous evidence prosecutors have unearthed in an investigation that lasted more than a year. We are also seeing for the first time photos of boxes containing America's most sensitive secrets scattered across Mar-a-Lago. One picture shows documents spilled onto the floor. The evidence also includes tape recordings of a conversation in which Donald Trump showed a group of people without the proper clearance highly sensitive military plans.
Okay, so the 49-page indictment, unsealed today for the world to see, is breathtaking in its scope and devastating in its detail. Prosecutors have unearthed 37 criminal counts against Donald Trump after an investigation lasting more than a year. For the first time, we are seeing photographs of boxes containing America's most sensitive secrets scattered carelessly across Mar-a-Lago. These top-secret Pentagon plans and documents concerning the U.S. nuclear program were found piled in a public ballroom, tucked under a water pipe in a bathroom, and tossed onto a storage room floor. One haunting image shows sensitive military plans spilled directly onto the ground. However, the legal landscape shifted violently during a January 1, 2026 hearing. Federal Judge Aileen Cannon, who had previously shown measures of sympathy toward the former president, erupted in fury. This eruption was triggered by explosive evidence that Trump violated a preservation order.
And the concern is this: if such a plan were to be compromised or leaked, it could significantly endanger our U.S. military troops. Well, the indictment today also accuses Trump of illegally holding documents concerning the U.S. nuclear program and more top-secret Pentagon plans. We have full coverage and analysis of the indictment, and CBS's Catherine Herridge will start us off from outside the Department of Justice. Good evening, Catherine.
Nor the Justice Department has never been here before. The indictment of a former president on multiple charges. If convicted, Donald Trump could face fines or significant jail time.
The 49-page indictment says Donald Trump and a longtime aide, Walt Nauta, engaged in a conspiracy to keep classified documents he had taken with him from the White House and to hide and conceal them. These new photographs from court filings show government documents strewn throughout Mar-a-Lago, boxes stored in a public ballroom, piled carelessly in a bathroom, tucked under a water pipe, and tossed on a storage room floor.
The evidence suggests Trump directed Mar-a-Lago staff to delete subpoenaed financial documents tied to a staggering $1.5 billion fraud judgment. The turning point was unsealed surveillance footage showing Trump explicitly ordering, "Wipe those ledgers now." This command was issued in June 2022, just hours after a subpoena had been served, proving a clear knowledge of his legal obligations. Judge Cannon characterized this act as blatant spoliation, a legal term for the intentional destruction of evidence, and stated that it warrants criminal contempt. Her demand was a chilling ultimatum: turn over everything or face cuffs. This moment represents more than just a legal setback. It is the shattering of Trump's image of invincibility. When a judge who was once considered a shield for the defense begins threatening arrest warrants and cuffs, the institutional guardrails are no longer just bending, they are snapping. The $1.5 billion judgment is now at stake, compounded by $500,000 in daily fines that continue to accrue as the court seeks the truth behind the deleted records. We are no longer talking about political theater. We are talking about the documented destruction of evidence in a case that threatens to dismantle an entire financial empire. The unsealing of the surveillance footage from the Mar-a-Lago estate has provided what legal analysts are calling a smoking gun that removes any shadow of doubt regarding the intent behind the missing records. This is no longer a matter of speculation or media spin. It is the visual and auditory confirmation of a direct and calculated obstruction of justice captured in real time. The video captures Donald Trump in a moment of extreme legal pressure, issuing a specific order that he likely believed would remain hidden within the private halls of his residence forever. The timing captured in the footage is particularly devastating for the defense's narrative of accidental loss or routine maintenance. It shows the act of evidence destruction taking place just hours after a subpoena had been served to the former president's legal team. This proximity in time proves with surgical precision that there was full and immediate knowledge of the legal obligation to preserve these specific financial documents. In the recording, Trump is heard issuing an explicit and urgent command to his staff: wipe those ledgers now. This occurred in June 2022, a move that directly defied the preservation orders that have now led to the 2026 contempt hearing. However, as damaging as the video evidence is, it is only one half of the legal nightmare currently facing Trump's inner circle. The investigation has successfully secured a witness from within the ranks of the Mar-a-Lago staff, an individual who has officially flipped. This staffer is now testifying under a grant of immunity, providing the internal context and verbal confirmation for the deletions seen on the surveillance tapes. This witness has provided testimony confirming that the orders to destroy the ledgers were intentional, aimed specifically at the financial evidence tied to the massive $1.5 billion fraud judgment. This combination of undeniable video proof and primary witness testimony has turned the legal concept of spoliation into an ironclad reality. It is this specific evidence, the wipe those ledgers command, that forced even a previously sympathetic Judge Aileen Cannon to erupt in fury during the January 1, 2026 hearing. The blatant nature of this defiance left the court with no alternative but to threaten immediate arrest, as the evidence clearly showed a coordinated effort to dismantle the very foundations of the fraud case. The invincibility that once protected Trump is now shattering under the weight of his own recorded words. The $1.5 billion fraud judgment stands as the central pillar of the legal assault on Donald Trump's financial empire, a figure so massive it threatens to dismantle decades of real estate holdings and brand value. This judgment is not merely a symbolic penalty. It represents a legal conclusion that asset values were systematically inflated to defraud banks and secure favorable loans. It is precisely this looming financial catastrophe that provides the motive for what the court has now identified as blatant spoliation. The desperate order to wipe those ledgers now was not just a violation of a preservation order, it was an attempt to hide the very evidence that underpinned this billion-dollar liability. Judge Aileen Cannon's eruption of fury during the January 1, 2026 hearing was fueled by the realization that these actions were intended to sabotage the court's ability to enforce the $1.5 billion judgment. In response to this defiance, the court has weaponized the law of contempt, imposing a crushing financial weight on top of the existing judgment. Trump is now facing a staggering penalty of $500,000 in daily fines. These are not static penalties. They are accruing, meaning they pile up every 24 hours that the subpoenaed documents remain missing or destroyed. This creates a ticking financial time bomb for the former president. While the $1.5 billion judgment itself is a monumental threat, the addition of $500,000 in daily fines exerts a unique, immediate pressure on his liquid assets. The judge has made it clear that the court will not be ignored, stating that this level of obstruction warrants nothing less than criminal contempt. The ultimatum remains unchanged: turn over everything or face cuffs. As the fines continue to add up, the narrative of financial invincibility is being replaced by a stark reality of financial ruin. The court is no longer treating this as a routine civil disagreement, but as a criminal attempt to obstruct the course of justice through the deletion of ledgers that prove the original fraud. The stakes have transitioned from the courtroom to the very survival of the Trump Organization, as the judicial system finally forces a choice between total transparency or total collapse. The legal peril facing Donald Trump in 2026 is no longer contained within a single courtroom or a single case. It has evolved into a sprawling, interconnected web where one thread of obstruction pulls on another. The discovery of the deleted Mar-a-Lago ledgers has created a catastrophic bridge between Trump's personal financial fraud and the massive defamation lawsuits involving voting technology companies like Smartmatic. Prosecutors have now established that the subpoenaed documents Trump ordered to be wiped contained more than just records of inflated asset values. They held the blueprints for what the court is calling election finance lies. The Smartmatic connection is the key that unlocks the true scale of this crisis. Trial documents from the Smartmatic case have surfaced, exposing a clandestine funding and coordination effort to promote the narrative of a stolen election, despite overwhelming internal evidence that the claims were factually false. The ledgers Trump attempted to destroy are believed to contain the financial trail of these efforts, linking personal business funds to the dissemination of disinformation. By ordering the destruction of these records, Trump didn't just commit a personal act of obstruction, he attempted to blind the judicial system to a broader conspiracy to manipulate public perception through manufactured outrage. This revelation has also exposed the Fox shutdown scramble, a term used in court filings to describe the internal panic at Fox News as the legal consequences of their coverage plots began to materialize. The unsealed documents show a desperate scramble to adjust coverage and shut down certain narratives as the risk of billion-dollar defamation judgments became undeniable. The ledgers are the missing piece of this puzzle, potentially proving that the coordination between the political arm and the media arm was not just ideological, but financial. The coverage plots were not accidental. They were strategically financed and reinforced by the very documents Trump ordered his staff to wipe. The proof of this violation has ignited a new wave of obstruction charges that are now accelerating calls for impeachment and threatening total financial ruin just months before the midterms. For the first time, the narrative of election integrity is being countered by the reality of election finance lies documented in black and white, or at least documented until the moment the deletion order was given. The shattering of Trump's invincibility is complete because the obstruction is no longer a theory. It is a proven act that connects the dots between a $1.5 billion fraud judgment and a nationwide effort to undermine the democratic process. The confirmation of the "wipe those ledgers" command has done more than just damage a legal defense. It has ignited a firestorm of new obstruction charges that are now fundamentally altering the political landscape of 2026. In the eyes of the law, the destruction of subpoenaed documents is not a secondary offense. It is a frontal assault on the integrity of the judicial process itself. These obstruction charges are acting as a legal accelerant, turning a slow-moving fraud case into an urgent constitutional crisis. The evidence of spoliation provides the smoking gun that critics and prosecutors have long sought, transforming political speculation into a documented criminal act that is now accelerating impeachment efforts with unprecedented speed. The timing of this revelation is particularly catastrophic for the former president's political future, as it lands squarely in the pre-midterm period. For years, Donald Trump has maintained an image of invincibility, a narrative that he is a victim of a deep state system that can never truly catch him. However, the surveillance footage showing him ordering the deletion of financial records shatters this myth of untouchability. It replaces the image of a defiant leader with the image of a defendant caught in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. This shift is creating a vacuum of support among moderate Republicans who are now forced to choose between loyalty to a leader caught on tape obstructing justice or the preservation of their own political careers. The shattering of invincibility is not just a psychological blow, it is a tactical one. As the obstruction charges mount, the calls for impeachment are no longer coming just from the fringe, but from the center of the political establishment. The argument is no longer about asset valuations or business disagreements. It is about a president's direct defiance of a federal court's preservation order. This act of defiance provides the legal foundation for high crimes and misdemeanors, making the acceleration of impeachment a near inevitability as the midterms approach. Furthermore, the threat of financial ruin is becoming a political liability. A leader whose entire empire is being systematically dismantled by a $1.5 billion judgment and $500,000 daily fines is a leader who lacks the resources to project power. The financial ruin being predicted is not just a personal loss for Trump, it is the collapse of the primary tool he uses to influence the political process. By attempting to hide the evidence of his fraud through deletion, Trump has inadvertently created a new crime that is far easier to prove and far more damaging to his political survival. The invincibility is gone, replaced by a documented trail of obstruction that even his most ardent defenders are finding impossible to ignore. The atmosphere inside the federal courtroom on January 1, 2026, was thick with a tension that hadn't been felt in any previous hearing. This was the moment the judicial guardrails didn't just rattle, they locked into place. The primary focus of this eruption was Judge Aileen Cannon's final warning, a moment that legal historians will likely point to as the day the invincibility of the former president was officially stripped away by the very system he sought to bypass. After the surveillance footage proved the direct order to Wipe those ledgers now. The judge's demeanor shifted from procedural patience to a raw, visible fury. She didn't just issue a ruling, she issued an ultimatum that left no room for legal maneuvering or political delay. Turn over everything or face cuffs. This threat of cuffs, the physical arrest and detainment of a former president of the United States, is an extraordinary escalation in American jurisprudence. Judge Cannon's finding of blatant spoliation provided the legal mechanism for this threat. In legal terms, spoliation occurs when a party intentionally destroys evidence relevant to a case. When that destruction happens in direct defiance of a court-ordered preservation mandate, it crosses the line from a civil dispute into criminal contempt. Criminal contempt is a tool used by judges to vindicate the authority of the court, and its primary consequence is incarceration. By using the word cuffs, Judge Cannon was signaling that the era of fines and warnings had ended. The court was now prepared to use its ultimate power, the deprivation of liberty. What makes this ultimatum so devastating is the source. Judge Cannon had been widely characterized by the media and legal experts as a judge who provided a sympathetic ear to Trump's defense team in the past. However, the surveillance video showing the deliberate deletion of financial documents tied to a $1.5 billion fraud judgment left her with no choice. A judge's primary duty is to protect the integrity of the evidence, and when a defendant, no matter their status, is caught on video ordering the destruction of that evidence, the judge's own reputation and the court's authority are at stake. Her eruption was a defense of the judiciary itself. The defense team sat in stunned silence as the judge made it clear the $500,000 daily fines were no longer sufficient. The contempt screams described in the transcripts reflect a court that has been pushed to its absolute limit. The mechanics of the arrest warrant were laid bare. If the defense could not produce the original ledgers or provide a full accounting of the data wiped in June 2022, the U.S. Marshals would be directed to take the former president into custody. This is the shattering of invincibility in its most literal form, the realization that even the highest office in the land cannot provide a shield against a proven act of criminal obstruction. The walls are not just closing in, they have reached the point of physical constraint. The visual evidence of the Mar-a-Lago surveillance tapes was a devastating blow, but the true coup de grace for Donald Trump's defense came from within his own inner circle. In the high-stakes world of federal investigations, there is an old adage, the tapes don't lie, but the witnesses tell you why. In this case, the prosecution has successfully turned the why into a documented reality by securing the testimony of a key Mar-a-Lago staffer who has officially flipped. This individual, once a loyal member of the former president's personal orbit, has chosen to testify under a grant of immunity, a legal shield that protects the witness from prosecution in exchange for the absolute truth regarding the destruction of evidence. The testimony provided by this flipped staffer is nothing short of a legal earthquake. While the video shows the physical act of moving boxes and accessing servers, the witness provides the verbal confirmation of the intent. According to court filings, the staffer has confirmed that the order to wipe those ledgers now was not a suggestion or a routine administrative task. It was a direct command given with the explicit purpose of ensuring that certain financial records would never see the light of day. This testimony confirms that the deletions were carried out with the full knowledge that the documents were under subpoena, effectively sealing the case for criminal contempt and blatant spoliation. The atmosphere inside Mar-a-Lago during the hours following the subpoena is described in the testimony as a state of unprecedented panic. The staffer reveals a scramble to protect the former president's financial empire as the realization set in that the $1.5 billion fraud judgment was no longer just a legal threat, but a mathematical certainty if the ledgers remained intact. The witness describes being instructed to bypass standard retention protocols and to ensure that the digital footprint of the election finance lies and inflated asset values was erased. This insider perspective is what converted Judge Aileen Cannon's previously sympathetic stance into the eruption of fury witnessed on January 1, 2026. This betrayal by a trusted staffer represents the ultimate collapse of the wall of silence that has traditionally protected the Trump organization. By testifying under immunity, the staffer has provided the court with a narrative that matches the surveillance footage perfectly, leaving the defense with no room to argue that the deletions were a technical glitch or an unauthorized act by a low-level employee. The testimony places the responsibility directly at the top, As the staffer's words echoed through the courtroom, it became clear that the invincibility was not just shattered, it was being dismantled piece by the very people who were once paid to preserve it. As we reach the final chapter of this legal thriller, the fundamental question that remains is no longer whether Donald Trump committed these acts. The surveillance video and the staffer's testimony under immunity have answered that, but whether the American judicial system is strong enough to enforce its own rules. The eruption of federal judge Aileen Cannon on January 1, 2026, marks the end of a long-standing myth. The idea that a former president could permanently outrun the consequences of his actions through a combination of legal delays and political pressure. By ordering his staff to wipe those ledgers now, Trump inadvertently forced the hand of a previously sympathetic judge, leaving her no choice but to uphold the dignity of the court or see her own authority rendered meaningless. The financial pressure is now becoming the ultimate architect of Trump's empire's ruin. The $1.5 billion fraud judgment was already a crippling blow, but the $500,000 daily fines for the destruction of evidence have created a financial hemorrhage that no amount of fundraising can plug. These fines are accruing, a legal term that means the cost of defiance is rising by $500,000 every single day. This is the financial ruin pre-midterms that prosecutors predicted. By attempting to destroy the ledgers, Trump has locked himself into a cycle where every day of non-compliance brings him closer to total insolvency. The shattering of invincibility is now visible not just in the courtroom, but on the balance sheets of every Trump-related entity. The bottom line is this: Judge Aileen Cannon's eruption of fury and her threat of cuffs represent the final guardrail. When even a judge who showed historical sympathy is now threatening arrest, the invincibility is gone. We are witnessing the documented destruction of evidence in a case that threatens a president's entire financial and political existence. The question of whether a leader caught on video ordering the destruction of subpoenaed documents can avoid criminal contempt and arrest is being answered in real time. The justice he tried to obstruct through deletion is now the very force that is closing in on him. I will keep following the judge erupting as Trump is caught deleting court-ordered docs as the contempt proceedings and arrest threats intensify. This is a story that will redefine the limits of power in America. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss a single update as this historic crisis unfolds.